The container was tagged for incineration. That's the only reason I opened it. Depot Kelvara 9 was 3 weeks from full decommission, and my job, the last job anyone had bothered to give me in 4 years, was to walk the cargo rows and pull the manifests on anything scheduled for the burn furnaces. Mostly it was machine parts, expired medpacks, a crate of commemorative plates from some colonial celebration nobody remembered. I was good at the work because I was slow and thorough and I had nowhere else to be. At 63, slow and thorough is about all you have left to offer. The container was a standard B-class transit box, gray, dented along one corner, manifest tagged. Biological material, clearance pending, incineration authorized. Almost logged it and moved on, but the classification code was wrong. The depot used a 4-digit prefix for organics, and this one had 5. Typo, probably. I pulled the latch anyway. She was in the back corner, behind a folded thermal sheet, knees drawn up, watching me the way a creature watches something larger than itself. Very still, very quiet, calculating the distance to the door. Ashen skin, eyes the color of old amber. Ears that came to a soft point, small enough that I could have carried her under one arm. She looked at my hands first, then my face, then the door behind me. I said, "I'm not going to hurt you," which I understand she had no reason to believe. She didn't move. Neither did I. We stayed like that for what felt like a long time. I left the container open, sat down on a crate across from it, and ate the lunch I'd brought with me. After a while, she crept to the edge and watched me eat. I broke the second half of my flatbread and set it just inside the container's lip and went back to eating mine. She watched the bread for a long moment. Then she took it. I didn't file the incineration order. What I knew by the end of that first day, she had been in the container for at least 3 days. Someone had put water in there with her. 2 small canisters, one an empty. The thermal sheet was syndicate pattern, the kind they use in their holding facilities out past the reach. The manifest had been filed from an off-station address that resolved, when I ran it through the depot's aging network, to a shell registry. Whoever had put her in that box had paid for the incineration order. They didn't want her found. They wanted the question of her closed. I thought about that for a long time, sitting in the cargo row with my back against the container wall and her asleep inside with the thermal sheet pulled up. I thought about the right thing to do, which was report it. I thought about who I would report it to. I thought about the depot director, a man named Culliver who I had watched, been forthful looking the other way on Port Authority irregularities, because it kept the transit fees coming in. I thought about what biological material clearance pending meant when the clearance had already been purchased. Then I stopped thinking and started doing the math on the shuttle schedule instead. The last civilian shuttle out of Kelvara 9 was in 11 days. Automated cargo runs would continue for another 3 weeks after that, but they'd be sealed manifest runs. No passenger provisions. The shuttle had 12 seats. As of this morning, 9 were booked. I had depot staff travel clearance. I could book a seat without raising flags. Book 2. The trick was the manifest. She'd need a transit identity to clear the shuttle's departure log. Not a forgery, those flagged on automated scans, but a legitimate dependent registration filed under my staff code. The depot's administrative system was ancient and badly maintained, and I had been quietly learning its gaps for 4 years because I had nothing else to do with my evenings. It took me until 3 in the morning, but I built her a file, Edmund Gray's cargo staff, and beside my name, a dependent. Veth, age unspecified, medical classification, staff family, cleared for departure. I went back to the cargo row at dawn and told her we had 11 days. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said something in a language I didn't know, soft and low, and went back to sleep. The agents arrived on day 7. 2 of them, traveling under Port Authority consultant credentials that were slightly too clean. The kind of credentials that cost money to produce. They were polite to Culliver. They were polite to the dock staff. They showed me the same professional courtesy when they found me in cargo row 7, which is to say they told me what they were looking for, and implied, in the gentle language of men who do not need to raise their voices, what would happen if I made their work difficult. The child, they said, was syndicate property, a biological asset contracted for transport. There had been an administrative irregularity in the holding process. They were here to correct it. I was standing in the corridor outside storage room 14, where she was sleeping. I told them I didn't know what they were talking about. The taller one offered me money, a figure that would have been significant to me 4 years ago, when I still had a mortgage and a wife, and a reason to think about the future. I told him I appreciated the offer. I didn't move. He told me about my pension, about the depot's contract review process, about how staff found to be harboring unregistered biological materials face a range of administrative consequences that he described in some detail. I listened to all of it. I told him that sounded serious. I didn't move. The second agent, shorter, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward and hit me twice, once across the jaw, once in the ribs on the left side, which he must have identified as a prior injury, because it dropped me to one knee. I stayed there for a moment, breathing. Then I got back up. I put my back against the door of storage room 14. They looked at me. I looked at them. I was a 63-year-old cargo handler with no weapon, no rank, no authority, and a cracked rib. They were 2 syndicate retrieval agents who did this for a living. I do not know what they saw when they looked at me. I know what I felt. There was no wrath in it. I was not a wrathful man. There was only the fact of where I was standing, and the understanding that I was going to remain there. It is a particular kind of stillness, I think, that humans arrive at when the decision has already been made, and there is nothing left to calculate. The agents had likely seen men fight. They had likely seen men beg. I don't know if they had seen this before. They told me I had until morning. The depot's automated closure sequence began at 0400 on day 9. Somewhere in the administrative tangle of Culliver cutting costs, the final decommission timeline had been moved up. I found out about it the same way everyone else did. The lights changed color and the environmental system began its stage shutdown cycle, and a recorded announcement informed all remaining personnel that the last shuttle's departure had been moved to a 600, not 0800 as scheduled. I had 90 minutes. I got her up. I had already packed a bag for her. Small, a shoulder strap she could manage, with the water canisters and what food I could spare, and the transit documentation I'd built. I walked her to the shuttle dock through the maintenance corridors, which I knew, and the agents did not. She kept up with me the entire way without complaint. Her small hand around 2 of my fingers, not tight, just present. At the dock junction I stopped. The closure sequence had rerouted power from the section behind us. The pressure doors had already cycled. I could get to the shuttle from here. She could get to the shuttle from here. But the sequence had locked the return path, and the shuttle's manifest check would log a departure. 2 passengers, grays and dependent, and the agents would know the moment it cleared. If I boarded, they would hold the shuttle on a contracting dispute. A biological asset under syndicate contract, a staff member found harboring. Culliver would give them the hold order without blinking. 11 days of careful work dissolved on a Port Authority stamp. If I didn't board, she cleared as a dependent under my staff code. No dispute to hold. A routine departure. I crouched down to her level. I showed her the ticket on the transit chip, and I pointed at the dock, and I pointed at her, and I put the chip in her hand. She looked at it. She looked at me. Her amber eyes were very steady. She said something in her language. 2 words. Quiet. And then she turned and walked through the dock door without looking back, because she was a child who had learned not to look back at things she was leaving. I stood up. I turned around. The agents were at the end of the corridor. The shuttle's departure was logged at 0611. 1 passenger. Dependent clearance. Staff code EG 771. I know because I pulled the log later, from a terminal in the port administrator's office, after Culliver had finished his paperwork, and the agents had finished theirs. And the question of what to do with a 63-year-old cargo handler, who had made himself very inconvenient, had been referred to a review process that was estimated to take several months. 1 life sign. Outbound. Beacon received at the reach relay. She made it out. I already knew she would. I'd done the math.